Recording.
I'm going to mess up stuff just to let y'all know.
And here comes everybody.
All right. Hi, everybody. We still got people that are coming into the meeting, but for those of us who are already in, I just want to take the opportunity on behalf of myself and Dr. Anthony Messina to welcome you to the latest installment of the Director's Toolbox. And this evening, we're going to be talking culture. We're going to be discussing culture. And we're very excited to have this evening's panel with us because they're all three amazing educators and, even more importantly, amazing people. So we're going to have a really rich and really rewarding discussion. So I'm going to introduce them by name, and then I'm going to let them introduce themselves. So we have with us this evening on the panel Professor Barry Hauser from the University of Illinois. Barry, you can wave to everybody. We have Dr. Myra Roden from Fayette County High School in Georgia. And then we have Mrs. Tiffany Hitz from Rachel Carson Middle School in Fairfax County, Virginia. And we're really, again, thrilled to have all three of these remarkable people with us. And we're going to let them introduce themselves further. So let's start with Professor Hauser.
Well, good evening, everyone. It's great to be with you. And thank you, Aris and Anthony, for the great invitation. And it's great to be with Myra and Tiffany as well as we talk about, creating a culture of excellence. A lot of my background is a big part of what I do in terms of creating that culture of excellence. I grew up in a really small town in northern Indiana, just a small town called North Liberty in South Bend, Indiana, outside of South Bend, Indiana, about 20 minutes away from the University of Notre Dame, and did my undergraduate degree at the University of Florida with Daybright, who's the director of bands there, studied trumpet with Joyce Davis, who served as the trumpet professor there, obviously, but also president of the International Trumpet Guild at that time. Had the wonderful opportunity to serve as drum major of the Gator Marching Band during the 1996 was the national championship, so some really awesome opportunities down there during that time frame. I don't know, but I really luck out. I had the wonderful, again, honor to student teach at Buchholz High School in Gainesville, Florida, and Paula Thornton was the director of bands there at Buchholz High School. So I owe so much to my career, to learning from Paula and Vicki Nolan. I was able to also then serve as the assistant director of bands there after student teaching. So learned so much of the framework there. Moved back to Indiana, where my family was located, and then taught in the public schools there after teaching in Florida in the public schools for a couple years. Back home in Indiana, taught in 5 buildings each day, 3 elementary schools, middle school, and high school in a town called Napanee, Indiana, in Elkhart, Indiana, kind of the music capital of the world, where the Bach factory is, Conselmer, and RV industry as well. So learned so much there, teaching and really being in the trenches at that point in time. The opportunity came to study at the University of Illinois with Jim Keene before he was ready to retire. So I studied wind band conducting with him as he was preparing to retire, and Pete Griffin, who was director of the Marching Illini at that time, so learned a great deal from him. And at that time, Eastern Illinois did a search, and that search failed, and so they were looking at someone to take over as the associate director of bands. So I was continuing graduate work while starting a new job there at Eastern Illinois. And that's how I got into the college ranks, if you will. It was never the plan to do that. I tested the waters and had a great time down there, and then became director of bands at Eastern Illinois. And then that led to, again, where I am now here at the University of Illinois. Pete Griffin stepped down from the position at Illinois, and he's doing wonderful work at Elmhurst College as the chair there, and had the opportunity to serve in this capacity. And so I will be starting my 10th year as the Associate Director of Bands and Director of the Athletic Bands at the University of Illinois.
Awesome. Thank you, Barry. Can we hear from Myra next?
Sure. Hello, everyone, and thanks again to Aris and Anthony for inviting me here tonight. I'm Myra Roden. I currently teach at Fayette County High School, which is in Fayetteville, Georgia, is a suburb of Atlanta. I am from Tuskegee, Alabama. So if you've heard of the Tuskegee Airmen, Tuskegee Syphilis Study, Tuskegee University, same old place, small town, about an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours from where I live right now. Went to Tuskegee Institute High School there, graduated and went to the University of Alabama. Graduated there in 1994. Since Barry mentioned that national championship, I too experienced one at Alabama. You know, we have so many there.
There you go. There you go.
But so I was there for the 92 championship there and was in the band for 4 years, obviously, for there. And started my teaching career in Tuscaloosa. So I taught at an all sixth grade school in Tuscaloosa. During that time, they were under the desegregation rule from the schools had to be desegregated. So all the sixth graders went to one school, all the seventh graders went to one school, all the eighth graders went to one school, the ninth and 10th graders went to one school, and the 11th and 12th graders went to one school, and that was the Tuscaloosa city school system at that time. So I was hired to start the band program at the sixth grade school as a first year teacher, because band started in seventh grade. And so I had that task as a first year teacher to do that. Ended up teaching music appreciation for the first year because the funding didn't come through, and did band after school, believe it or not. And then started there the second year as a full-time band program at that sixth grade school. So I stayed there for 3 years. Then I went back home to Tuskegee and taught at Tuskegee Institute High School, which turned into Booker T. Washington High School, which is what it is now. They had a couple of schools to consolidate. And of course, the name of that school is after the founder of Tuskegee University. So that's where I taught, stayed there for 4 years. And then I left there and went to Sidney Lanier High School in Montgomery, Alabama, which is just right down the road from the governor's mansion, and left there and went to Fayette County, Georgia. So when I had 9 years of teaching experience when I moved to Georgia, had my own program all 9 years, and I came into Fayette as an assistant. So that was a learning experience for me, but I did that for 4 years. And then when the director left that I was assisting, I took over the program, and 17 years later, I'm here. So this is year number 26 for me. During that time, I got my master's when I was in Tuskegee and Montgomery, again from the University of Alabama, and then worked on my doctorate while I was here in Fayetteville and with Tom Friskillo at the University of Southern Mississippi. That's it.
Awesome. Thank you, Myra. And can we hear from Tiffany now?
Sure. Thank you so much. I live in Virginia. I live in Northern Virginia, just outside of DC, really close to Dulles Airport. And I am pretty much a Virginia girl through and through. Have lived here most of my life and have only taught in Virginia. I'm 22 years into my career, and the last 10 of them, I've taught exclusively middle school band. Before that, I did a mix of middle school and elementary. We have an elementary band program here. And I was an assistant at a middle school and also teaching at a couple of elementary schools. And before that, elementary, when I started in the county in 2001. And before that, I had a little bit of experience with high school, but just my first couple of years teaching. I've been at my current school, Rachel Carson Middle School, for the last 6 years.
Great. Thank you so much. So let's start as a basis with our first question here. What do each of you consider to be the key components of a healthy culture when you are in a program? And let's start with Tiffany on this one.
Sure. I come back to the Culture Code book that I know we've spoken about and kind of a lot of the basis for our discussion tonight. And he talks about 3 things in there that you kind of create an atmosphere where you're saying you are safe, we share risk, and that this is our purpose. We have a shared purpose. And I think that's really the premise for all of it and the foundation for all of it. Creating a space where there's safety for the students and for yourself to make mistakes, where you grow and try things together, a shared purpose, team-mindedness, and at the heart and the foundation, and also the overarching idea of all of it is just that you're caring about each other and taking care of each other.
Wonderful, thank you. And Myra?
So I totally agree with everything Tiffany says. And with all of those components, you have to make sure you have all of the people involved in making sure that all of that is together. So of course, the directors and anybody who is working with the kids under your supervision, the students, you have to make sure they buy into that culture, especially your administrators, who oftentimes may not be musicians at all. So, you know, we have to train them to get them to understand what we do and become a part of that culture as well. And then of course our community. And it's all about, you know, communicating and making sure that the culture that we want to build that we are explaining that culture to all four of those areas, because if one of those four areas goes sour, then you're going to have a tough time. So just getting everybody on the same page.
Great, thank you. And Barry?
Yes. Those are great. I think we're going to find a lot of agreement between the three of us, and we didn't plan this out even. So, you know, culture, I don't know. Culture is such an important part of what we do, and I think culture is used so much. The term culture is used so much, and oftentimes that can, you know, tonight, I just want to make sure, I think, and I don't want to speak for all three of us, but I'm sure we feel this way, that when we say culture, that musical excellence is always going to be part of that culture. And, you know, in describing culture, culture ultimately follows the leader, and I think culture is really all about leadership. I've got this phrase that I share with our students when we meet over the summer at our summer marching camp. You know, leaders create cultures and cultures create leaders. It's a very simple phrase, but it is so true to the heartbeat of everything that we do within our programs, and music programs specifically. And I think for this phrase to really work, this means that, you know, leaders ultimately are going to be creating culture in the early stages of our organization or whenever we take over a program. But the culture itself then is going to create leaders as the organization matures. And I think that's part of our overall system of how our programs will ultimately run. You know, inspiring leaders create inspiring cultures. I don't think we've seen cultures in our band programs or our music programs that have come out of, you know, poor leadership. And so I'm putting a lot of pressure maybe at the leadership positions of who we entrust. That may be the band director, music educator. That can also be our student leaders. That can be every member, whoever we put into those roles. And I think all of this ultimately leads into our performance excellence. You know, another thought with this is, you know, creating a constructive culture. And I think this is a testament to what both Tiffany and Myra both spoke about. You know, when we create this constructive culture, you know, this is defined as a culture that is ultimately oriented towards achievement, self-actualization, creativity, participation, valuing people, and one that places really a high priority on healthy relationships. And I think this is, again, going back to feeling safe, feeling inclusive, and, you know, that's a very important part of this. Last thing I'll say, you know, about this is just, I think this is, again, the culture that we look at when we think about Dr. Tim and leadership versus servitude leadership, you know, the I, me versus we, us. And I think ultimately we find that in our cultures that we create within our music programs, maybe back in the days, and I know I was part of a program that was very I, me oriented and kind of driven by fear. We can't really run programs that way anymore. It's got to be so inclusive, it's got to be collaborative, but we also have to make sure that we're providing direction and that level of excellence along the way with those cultures that we create.
Awesome. Thanks to all three of you for those like fantastic answers. Continuing on with our next question, it has a couple different parts to it. So walking into a new program on day one, first, how do you assess the program's existing culture? And in addition to that, once you assess it, how do you foster the culture of excellence that you might want moving forward? And let's start with Tiffany for that question.
Sure. Boy, there's a lot with this question, right? And I think it kind of depends on the lead time you have going into a program. There are situations where maybe you're hired and you start the next day, and other times where you have a whole summer to prepare and kind of survey what you have. And in that situation, I think getting in there and just seeing the physical space really makes a difference. You can tell a lot about what's been happening when you just see how things are cared for. You see the state of the equipment, how the room, maybe if it's how it's organized. So I think that definitely plays in of how much time you have. If you have the opportunity, meet with leadership students early on, get to know them. I did that. I know 2 jobs ago, I had the opportunity to have 8th graders come in. In Fairfax, middle school is only 7th and 8th in most of our schools. And I was able to meet with 8th graders ahead of time. And so I got to know them outside of any kind of structure. And so I got to learn a lot about what they thought and what had already been happening just from talking to them. You can do, now we have limitless ways to see what's going on, right? We can do Google searches. There are lots of videos out, lots of recordings, but I would recommend trying to get a hold of some videos of performances, whether you can find them online or maybe from the previous band director or parents or something, because I just think there's a little extra something you can see in a video than just listening to the band. You're going to get to know what they sound like, but you see how they get on and off stage. You see how they dress. You see how they handle transitions between pieces. Do they have a rotating section, or does everyone stay in the same seats? Did the same kids stay on snare drum the whole concert, or did people move around? So I think you learn a lot about what's already happened. And then I think it's obviously, as probably most of us would do, you talk to people, right? Talk to other people that are teaching in that area, trusted advisors, maybe talk to administration or other teachers. But the only thing I would caution there is just to make sure that you use all of those conversations as information gathering and not as fact, right? Like just kind of let it all feed in, and then funnel it through as you start to see things, and just don't assume, if somebody tells you something horrible, don't just go, oh my gosh, what I get myself into, because it's just their perspective, but it can just give you information of where to start from. And then I think once you figure that out and you need to get things moving forward, I think communicating clearly, it was already mentioned about like communicating constantly what your ideas are, but setting that really high expectation and being really consistent about it. I think consistency is one of the things that will bring about a culture change quicker than anything. Because if you're trying to make something happen and you're meeting resistance and you back down, then all of a sudden it's a different ballgame, right? Like who's running the show? But be consistent with your ideals and with your expectations. Focus on your big ticket items. I feel like I grew up having people say, you can only fix 3 things your first year. And you can argue that lots of different ways, because I think it depends on your situation. But, prioritize. What are the things that you need that are really fundamental to getting that culture shift? What are the things that you can't live with the way they are? And then focus on making those changes, instilling that growth mindset, teaching them to reflect, that they can make mistakes, showing them that you make mistakes. We're all trying, when you're new to a building, everybody knows more than you do about that building. So leaning on the students, leaning on the community, leaning on the parents, not avoiding mistakes, but just trying things. And it can be like your greatest, best idea. And if it doesn't work, oh, well, guys, we tried, let's try something else. And kind of showing them that you're willing to do that, I think creates some buy-in, because they know that you're not just coming in a vacuum with this is how it's going to be. You might have ideas, but then you're morphing them and you're adjusting based on what's happening. I think I made a note to myself. I wanted to talk about vulnerability loops, just showing them, that you can make mistakes, and it's not about, boy, I'm awful. It's like, okay, what went wrong? How am I going to fix it? Showing them that you can screw up too. I share every year, and it's probably embarrassing I'm sharing with you guys now, but I share every year this story with my students. A couple of years ago at assessment, and we played our march, and then I go to conduct the downbeat of the next piece, and my scores were in the wrong order. And if you know these pieces, they start out completely different. And I conducted the beginning of Sovereign Variants, and my kids played the beginning of American River Songs. And I share that with students because it was fine. The bottom line is I had like those moments of, oh my goodness, the kids just saved my whole career. This is the only thing anyone would ever remember about me. But in truth, because we were a team and we were all working together, and maybe it says other things, maybe it says they weren't watching me or something, I don't know. We can go lots of different ways with this, but to me, I choose to look at it that we were a team and we were a group and we were all in it, and nobody was going to leave me out to dry. We were just all in it. And I talk to kids about that, and I think we should talk to kids about it. Over programming is probably one of the areas that I would imagine all of us at some point have had an issue with that. And it's like having those honest conversations with kids of like, listen, I thought we were going to have time to put this piece together and we don't for whatever reason, and not playing the blame game, not telling them they didn't practice hard enough or they didn't practice enough, they didn't work hard enough, but just kind of taking some of that ownership and creating that, I think really goes a long way. And then I'll just say one more thing. I know I've talked a lot about this. This is an area that I feel like I'm just really passionate about, creating belonging cues for them. I like to, at school, everybody has probably a lot of people do a stand name tag at the beginning of the year, a little half sheet with their name. We make a big deal about having kids decorate them if they want to. They don't have to, but as soon as they decorate it, then without even having a conversation, I have connections with them. I know when they're getting their instrument out, oh, I can see that person loves basketball. So I can ask them, when their last game was or when their next game is, or I can just ask them questions that I wouldn't necessarily remember all of those things, but it kind of cues me into that. Try to celebrate birthdays, or at least acknowledge birthdays and half birthdays. That makes them feel special. Exit tickets and surveys, kind of always reaching back to what they want. Surveys at the end of the year, some pluses, some minuses, some wishes. What are things, and being willing to accept that feedback and do something with it. What are things they're really loving? What are things they're not enjoying? And then being brave enough and being reflective enough to adjust and not view them as, view your students as your students. They're collaborators with you. They're part of your team. I like to do that with pieces, and I'm disappointed how the years played out, because this is the time of year when our students have the most say in what they play for this May concert. And it's not just carte blanche. They submit pieces they're interested in. We try to find pieces that would be appropriate. And if we find and vote, they just have that extra bit of like, this is my music. This is just what I've decided is good music for them. It's what they've decided is really good music for them. So giving them choice when you can, creating mottos, all those types of things, just creating those opportunities for them to lead and make decisions, I think are all ways to kind of get that moving forward.
Great. All right. Can we hear from Professor Hauser next?
Yeah, I think again, as Tiffany stated, I'm going to say some of these things that she shared. I hope that we can do some of these things maybe before we accept the job. part of our research. And what I mean by that is, do your homework, look at websites, look at YouTube, social media, talk with people. And, Tiffany mentioned some of these things. What's the vibe from the administrators, the coaches, teachers, parents? And then I think the next layer, ultimately, students. And I think variety of levels that we teach on, whether collegiate, middle school, high school, we can put more emphasis on some of these, but, every situation is different too. And I think the important takeaway, and I know, again, Tiffany said this, we can't accept these things that we find out as fact. In terms of what the culture is going to ultimately be, because we can be a great agent of change if we come in here. It may be, again, that there was, I'm not trying to play the blame game, but it could be there was some poor leadership there before, or really unfair circumstances along the way. And we've got an awesome opportunity to make a difference. Sometimes we get told wrong information too. When I left Florida and came back to Indiana, I was told, I was going from a program, Buchholz at that time had about 250 students in the program. And of course, coming from college, being a young educator, I'm like, oh my gosh, this 250 piece band, they're so small, because, college band, like 400. And I'm like, it's just how idiotic I was. My gosh, 250 people, that's a huge band. And then took a job in Indiana, and the principal said, yeah, we've got about 80 or so in the program. Well, I started and I had 31, and I had never experienced anything like that before, even growing up in a small town. So I learned a tremendous amount of even about how to shift gears quickly, and what to do. So a big part of shifting gears was meeting with the students, and that was the high school group that I met with those section leaders and just listened. I think so often we talk, we speak, we give directions. We're used to doing that. It's amazing just by sitting down and listening to the students. What did they like about the program? And I prefaced it, of course, you set parameters. We're not going to, talk poorly about previous directors or teachers or things like that. But what, if you, in your dream world, what could you do to change the culture? And what do you want to keep? What's important to you? What's considered a tradition? And so I wrote those all up on a whiteboard. Those are those things that you have like a marker and you write on the board, not smart board or anything like that, just in case anybody out there doesn't know what those are. So, looking at those elements, writing that up there so we could visually see. And, again, that was helpful for me. I think it was helpful for them so they could articulate what their own culture was. And that led to developing a mission statement. I'm not going to say that we do that every year. But, when you're going into a program, if there's not a mission statement, what does that mean? Does that define your success? No, it doesn't. But it does get our mindset on a similar page, or at least starts that process. Don't come in and make a bunch of changes. Oftentimes, we as college music education students, we get the job. We've spent all this time and hours and years and, oh my gosh, so much a part of our lives in practice rooms. And we've learned all these great tools and resources in college. We get the job. What do? We typically revert back to how our high school band director taught. We've forgotten about some of the things that we learned in college. So, don't naturally revert back to that. Not saying that that's a bad experience, but again, there's a lot that can change from when we were in high school and so forth. So, we don't want to make a bunch of changes unless there are necessary items that, of course, need to be changed. Dealing with, inclusivity. Maybe there just were some things taking place of people breaking the rules all the time. You've got to hold a hard line, but you can still do that with compassion and with care. Listen, make those notes. And I feel that at this point, this is when your excellence, your culture of excellence really starts before we start implementing. This is your foundation right there.
Great. And we can hear finally from Dr. Roden.
All right. So many things have been said. That's just been great so far. They took most of my answers, if not almost all of them. But I totally agree with doing your homework ahead of time, but taking everything that you hear with a grain of salt. Because what you have to do when you go into a new situation is figure out why people are telling you what they're telling you about the program. So they may tell you that, oh, the marching band is awful. Well, you know, you may know that it's not, but there's a reason why they have that opinion. So sometimes you just have to do a little digging just to see what's going on. Why would the students think that? What does the student body think about the band program currently? What do your administrators think? What do your coaches think? What do they think to the high school teachers out there? You know, you have to build that relationship with those coaches as soon as you walk through the door. It'll make your life so much easier. And, you know, the football kids and all the sports kids will respect your kids and vice versa. It'll work. You just have to put yourself out there. Not that you're necessarily asking for approval of anything, but it's just building that relationship across the school. Talking with the student leaders, absolutely. Seeing what the culture is already, what the traditions are. You don't want to go in and, you know, change the national anthem when they've been playing the same one for the last 15 years because you like this arrangement better. Okay, that's just your opinion, but the community is expecting this. So you have to figure out what the school community is like. You also have to figure out where you chose to teach. Notice I say chose, where you chose to teach. So, you know, go out into the community, go hang out at the mall, go to, you know, the restaurants, drive around and see the neighborhoods that are in your school, you know, figure out where your kids are coming from, and then figure out if they are different than you are, and you have to try to figure out what that culture is so you can learn that culture so you can teach them from their point of view as opposed to your point of view, just depending on where you are. I wouldn't suggest coming into a new situation and just deciding that it's my way or the highway. You know, traditions, kids stick around for friends, and they stick around for things that happen, you know, traditionally. And if you go in there and you just completely change everything, it's not going to work for you. Now, if something is toxic, that's a different story. You know, you have to make some changes, but, you know, what may have worked at your previous school, what may have worked at your high school or at your university may not work where you're teaching. You have to know the community where you're teaching. And so don't just assume that it's wrong because you didn't do it that way where you came from. It might work in that community where you are. So you have to learn where that community is and what they're doing. Even with music, I think Tiffany mentioned things about programming. You know, there could be some things that, you know, the spring concert, you always do XYZ. Once again, you still have to take things with a grain of salt because always could have been just last year. You know, but if there were things that happened 10, 15 years straight, you know, there's no way. Or try things for 1 year just to see how it works. And then if you don't like it, then you can say, hey, I have an idea. Tell me what you think about this. And then have a conversation about it, you know, and when the kids buy into it, especially your student leadership, you have an easier time selling everyone else once you get the student leadership on board. To kind of keep that community atmosphere, you know, sometimes you have to talk with the kids about how they do things. So if you are expecting them to act as one unit, then you should expect them to do the little things as one unit as well. So that's something that you can implement immediately. For instance, and I'm always reverting back to high school because that's where I've been for most of my career. First semester, and you have to do the marching band thing. What does your sideline look like? You know, do you want all the kids to just have their stuff everywhere, or do you want it to be orderly? You know, does that transfer to your instrument storage room? Does that transfer to your rehearsal room? You know, little things like that can be implemented immediately. And if that's not something that they are used to, then you have to train them just like you train them on how to play with a good sound. So that culture is something that you can do immediately. But anything that would be more of a tradition for the students that's not toxic, sometimes you just have to sit and watch and see and figure out why they do things and then make those changes slowly. I've heard people say, you turn it like you're steering a cruise ship, not a motorcycle. So it's going to take time to change things, and it could be a couple of years. I'll just go ahead and say I see young teachers all the time who get really, really upset. I don't know if upset is the word, irritated because things aren't going their way immediately. It's not going to happen immediately. Changes are going to have to be slow. It's going to take some time. You got to put some years into it. In 1 year, you're not going to build a program. You may be able to make some changes, but you've got to make sure you stick around and take some time, get the buy-in of the community, and it'll get there. You have to believe that you can do it. Yeah, that's it.
Awesome. And thanks to all three of you all for such fantastic answers to those two questions. Dr. Roden, Myra, one of your answers has really kind of dovetailed extremely well into a question that we got from one of the participants tonight. And here it is. It's related to repertoire and programming. In what ways have you utilized programming and repertoire and perhaps the curriculum itself to help foster a culture of excellence within your bands?
Ooh, that's a loaded question for me. Anyone who knows me knows that programming is probably what I like to do the least because there's so much good stuff out there. I am the master of being the last minute to figure out what I want to play. But, you have to look at the kids that you teach. And one thing that you want to do is make sure that, first of all, you're programming good music, and that's sit-down band or stand-up band, but making sure that what you are playing represents the kids who are in front of you every day. But that being said, you're still the educator. So sometimes you will have to choose things to expose the kids, not just to play what they want to play. So you have to make sure you just have that good balance. I'm one for the older band literature. I will program that quite a bit. And I always have to be reminded that there's a lot of great new stuff out there by a lot of great new composers. And so I have to make myself do that, but that's just me. So whatever your it is, you have to figure out what that is about your programming and make sure that you are representing the kids who are sitting in front of you every day. And then at the same time, you're not only playing what they like, but playing what you should teach them as the educator in all different types of music, not just one.
Great. Professor Hauser, I would love to hear you talk about this because I know that you do concert bands and work with concert bands at Illinois, but you are also obviously the marching band director. So how do you thread this, or how do you do that within both those settings? Any thoughts you could offer in both those particular genres?
Yeah, and since we're looking at kind of both of those mediums, if you will, I think what we do with the marching band is going to be geared more towards not even our own students per se, but it's going to be really geared towards the demographics of people that we have in the stadium. We are there as an entertainment component, but at the same time, what are we doing to constantly educate and keep our students playing? One of the greatest aspects of the job that I have at Illinois was something that I hoped for all of my public school students to be able to do. I didn't care if they majored in music. I just wanted them to continue playing their instrument, their love of music, to continue that, whether they're going into engineering or whatever the case may be. So, we do make sure that when we are choosing arrangements of the show themes that we do, that it's not going to all necessarily be classic rock, even though our stadium loves classic rock, because that's the demographics of what we typically have there in Memorial Stadium. That being said, we got to make sure that we're finding challenging music, but also attainable based on, if we're putting a 1 week show together. If we start a show Monday and we're going to perform it Saturday, we're not going to have, the most complex 16th note passages for all of our woodwinds because it's just too much to turn around. We got very talented students, yes, but again, we want to make sure that we perform at a very high level. And I think that's just a testament that we can carry over to the concert bands as well, that just because a piece is technical doesn't mean that, means that we're a great ensemble because it's the hardest piece out there. I always love when in our world of band directing, we have groups that come in or band directors that say, well, I'm a grade 6 director, I'm a grade 6 program. Well, just because we play Hindemith Symphony in B flat doesn't mean maybe we should be playing Symphony in B flat by Hindemith. It's making sure on the concert band side, and I think, when we look at this, it's got to be attainable. What are we doing that maybe there's going to be that piece in this concert rotation that's going to be the challenging piece? And that could be anything. It could be more of a ballad type. It could be a multi-movement. It could be something more, even novelty if it needs to be, based on the type of concert that we're doing. But, we do need to find a really good balance with things. I'm right there with Myra. I love standard rep. But I do know, too, especially, at the university level, we need to continue to, compose and, compose more music, more new music. We need to continue to include a variety and very diverse group of composers. That gets back again to the students that we have in front of us. Is there a piece of music that all of our students can find something to relate to? Maybe not every piece, but is there something in that concert program that appeals to them? And then does it appeal to the audience? And I hate to, use this phrase, but it's the way that, I've been taught. It's going back to that concert selection, in terms of that rep selection, that it's the dinner buffet. What are we doing to include a march, a ballad, something multi-movement, something old, something new? All of those things, I think we just make ourselves better as educators, as conductors, and we're doing our students so much more of a service along the way as well.
Great. And if we can hear from Tiffany.
Hi. I think for me, I do try to give students opportunity to choose. And it isn't all the time. It's usually just at the end of the year at the May concert. And it's not even, I'll give them just like a couple pieces and say, you pick one. I give them the opportunity to just kind of carte blanche. What is something that you want to play? And then we do the research and figure out what pieces are available. We can find good arrangements of, because if we're going to be working on it for a while and we're going to be spending money on it, we don't want it to just be awful, but find a good arrangement of something. And then we kind of provide, okay, here are all the options that will work, and then give students time to review those and choose. And that becomes part of the May concert. And I'm not going to lie, I've done that other times in the year as well. If I'm kind of stuck and I'm like, wow, all of these 3 pieces meet the goal I have for the ensemble right now, and they're all accessible, and I think they just fill all these needs, then sometimes I might say to the kids, all right, what are your thoughts about these? We might read it and then say, what are your thoughts? What do you guys think? Where do you see the most challenge? Which melodies do you like the most? Because they're the ones that are going to be playing them. So I think it is important that we're programming. I think wise words, like I don't disagree with anything that Barry or Myra said, like they're like spot on. Make sure it's great literature, but it does need to be reflective of our kids and what they want to play. They're electing to be in band. We need to make sure that we're feeding the reasons they want to be there.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that. So for our next question, this kind of goes towards what happens and what strategies do you have for when you take over a program that is negative or has a passive culture, and what strategies or steps do you take for that? And as a follow-up to that, maybe how do you handle individual students that might present as apathetic or negative and influence the group as well? And for this, we'll start with Professor Hauser, but before he starts, I just want to briefly plug Barry is one of the runner of the Smith Walbridge Clinics, which happens usually every summer. And I encourage you guys to check out that website, which I will post in the chat. And there are sessions on leadership, drum lines, front ensemble, color guard, student conductors, all kinds of things. Just a wonderful, wonderful resource. Encourage you to check that out. So, Professor Hauser.
Thank you, Dr. Messina. Appreciate that. This is a difficult one because I think, we can answer this in this type of situation here amongst friends. And then, we get down to it and we're dealing with a situation involving a student that may be contributing to this negative culture, and we may deal with it a little bit differently based on when it's happening, where it's happening, and so forth. So, this is going to probably sound more textbook of an answer right now compared to what would happen if it's truly happening right there on the field, in the rehearsal room, and so forth. But, so I'm going to give kind of a maybe general safe answer, I guess, in this situation. I don't feel like you can allow negativity to really sabotage the overall morale of what you're trying to establish. There's going to be naysayers out there. We know that. There are naysayers, that are naysayers of music. And why do we even have music? And probably even more so now with COVID-19, you've been able to do this, remotely, so why do you need to worry about doing things face-to-face? No, we know now more than ever that we need to do face-to-face instruction, because I've never been able to elevate the human spirit through a Zoom conference call, I'll tell you that. In looking at the scope of this, we've got to deal with negativity at the cultural level. And part of it, I think, stems from, I think it's so quick to blame a student for this. And it may be a miscommunication along the way. Maybe they don't understand something that we've got out as an expectation. Maybe we're interpreting action to this differently than what they're responding. I think oftentimes, and I'm guilty of this big time, you see people with that look on their face and you just think, oh my gosh, why do you hate me? Why do you hate what we're doing? Am I not doing enough to, provide enough excitement, enthusiasm for you in what we're doing? And then it's a misinterpretation, and you realize that maybe there's something going on in their life that they may want to share, they may not want to share. So, I think we need to be really careful about, do we pick a fight with those energy vampires or not? Because they really may not be energy vampires after all. They may just be having a bad day or a bad reaction to something that's taken place. Success breeds success and failure breeds bad attitudes. The more success that we have, and that doesn't mean trophies and plaques and things like that. That means those everyday wins that we have with our students. When that student that has not been able to get over middle C on clarinet is finally able to do that, and that light bulb goes off, it's a glorious moment for everybody. And you know that your culture is so strong when it's not just that person that's responding in a positive way. It's you, and it's the rest of the class as well. We are all in this together. There's a lot of things that I think we need to just really keep in mind with this. It reminds me a lot of my first year at Illinois. And the Marching Illini has these two, phrases, nicknames, whatever you want to call them. The nation's premier college marching band and the best band in the land. All of our bands have these types of things that go with that. We take a great deal of pride in that. Our alums take a great deal of pride, and in a lot of ways it sets the expectations just by having those. But my first year at Illinois, I was hired 13 days before preseason camp started. It was the first time in Illinois history that we had 8 home games. 5 home games were back-to-back starting off the season. I walked into my office. There was nothing in the office. The director of bands at that time got rid of every file, every computer file. There was no pregame. There was nothing. I'm starting completely from scratch 13 days before student leadership's going to show up. So I'm thinking at this point, and trust me, folks out there, I love my job at Illinois, but that was the biggest moment in my career that I said I made the biggest horrible move in my entire career and life. And I went into this with, I was tired, I was exhausted by the time that the students got there because I ripped through some shows. I got a pregame put together that was the historic pregame. You can't change pregame at a place like Illinois. You just don't do that. That's, one of those things you don't change. So, in looking at that, I was really set up for failure in so many ways just based on that situation. It was not the most pleasant experience for my first year. We're doing all right now, and I love all of my students that were there at that time because I think we all learned a lot at that time. But to my point, this student came up and said, Hauser, why are you working us so hard? We're already the best band in the land. We're the nation's premier college marching band. And I said, well, that's all well and good, but we have a level of expectation here that we need to play at a certain level. We need to march at a certain level. We need to rehearse at a certain level. We need to treat each other with respect. We need to, again, be collaborative with all of this. And I said, if you want to get a reality check, let's go take a look at YouTube and look at some of the other college marching bands that are out there, and let's see what excellence looks like. And so that was a culture change where I didn't think we were going to have to do anything like that at all. So my point to this, we've got to be flexible. We've got to be patient, and we've got to coach. We've got to teach. And it's just far easier to be negative in our world than to be positive. And we've got to continue to keep that realistic approach on this. Keep it positive. You may not have the best of days, but usually when we come up against a challenge like that, that means that we are making progress. Hard to think about, hard to believe, but we are. If it's easy going, something's going to go wrong. Something's not right with your culture if it's going too easily. We've got to have those bumps in the road in order to grow.
Wonderful, thank you. And Tiffany.
I think it's important if you're coming into a situation that has a negative culture, I think you need to give voice to that and give voice to the stakeholders, the students, the parents. And it was mentioned before, sit down and talk to them, find out what they want it to be, what they loved, what their maybe hopes are to have things different. I think using some anonymous surveys are really good. And I always, when I give kids surveys, and I give them surveys a lot, and it's always with the option of being anonymous, they can put their name. And I think that's a great tool if they're willing, so that we can have a conversation, we can have follow-up. But in truth, in giving a survey, all I want is the information. And then again, I'm just going to take it in and reflect and see, where I think I can make adjustments and what I think I could change. But letting kids kind of be able to tell you, creating that safe space that it's okay to be honest. As long as it's not coming from a place of being hurtful, they can be honest. And then I want to take that as a jumping off point for how we're going to move forward. If it's, if it's just like a few individuals or something, I think if there's a way to draw them in more, to give them more ownership or some kind of leadership or responsibility that maybe they haven't had. Barry said it earlier, I wrote it down, unfair circumstances. You never know what is going on in a kid's mind, and they could be holding on to some small comment that they felt you slighted someone a couple of weeks ago, and they're feeling protective of them. You just never know. And so I think giving them that opportunity, to express how they're feeling, drawing them in and giving them something extra to do. Maybe they were passed over for something, you just never know. But I think that's really important, that you are kind of communicating all the time. I see you, I care about what you're feeling, I care about what you're thinking. And I want to know, and I want us to do this together. If it's really bad and you try, then I think sometimes you just have to wait people out. And there might, that might happen at some point. And I think we just accept that we can't pander to them. But we do need to be making sure that we're presenting a culture that people want to be a part of. And sometimes there just might be someone that doesn't want to. And that's okay. Don't take it personally. I always start the year off with every class. I think, and it's it could be corrective if you were in this situation. But I have an essential question, and I ask the students, what do we as musicians need to know and do in order to have a successful band? And I put it up the first, in part of the first probably week or for block schedule, maybe even 2 weeks, we revisit that every day. And some classes and some groups, they just start spitting answers out because they know they know what they want it to be and they know what they need to do, and others really struggle to put a name to it and put a face to it. And if you're in a situation where it's really a negative feel, it might just be that they haven't, that mission statement that was talked about, they don't have that purpose yet. And so you can help guide them with that. And you can also, it's really great because it can be a conversation starter. If someone says something and they're kind of hinting at somewhere you want them to get to, you can lead them there. And then I always add, I always take those together and create wordles and then make it a big poster. And every year, and we have a place in Fairfax that'll make the nice posters and they can laminate it and everything. And we put it up on the wall and I revisit it all year long. When things maybe aren't headed a certain way, it's just like your procedures for your class, right? You review them all the time. I review that all the time. Hey, you guys said, so just give yourself a mental check-in. How you doing? Talk to your neighbor. You said you needed to do this. Are you doing that? And I think that can kind of correct that culture when you come in and you just don't feel like it's great. But I think just above all, be consistent, be diligent. And I think sometimes you just have to show the kids that you care enough, even if you're not feeling like they care, you care enough for them and you. You've got enough on your shoulders for all of them.
Great, thank you. And Myra?
Just to piggyback on figuring out, what the students are thinking. A very quick way of doing that, in addition to all of the things that have been mentioned before, just simply talk to them. Call that kid in your office who's acting up and just say, what's going on with you? Like, what's your problem? Let's talk. Let's figure out what's going on. One-on-one conversations are so important. And, sometimes you just have to take them to where other kids can't see that kid is in your office, whether it's a different time of day. And then at the end of the conversation, no one knows what we talked about in this room. So if other students know what we talked about, I'm blaming you because I'm not telling anybody. And that kind of builds that trust relationship between you and those students. Talk to the parents too. If there's a issue with negativity in your group, pick up the phone and call. You never know. Even right now, we've had kids who won't log on. We're all going through that situation with the virtual learning. But, as we reach out to parents, we find out different things about parents being on the front lines, about kids who are having issues with family members who've passed away or family members who've gotten sick. And the kids aren't going to tell you that. Some of them will if they trust you enough to do that. And some of them will just act up in different ways. It's the same thing in person. You never know what has gone on in this kid's life. And so don't just necessarily assume that a kid is being negative because of you. It could be because of something else, but the only way you're going to do that is to talk to that kid. Talk to those parents, talk to the assistant principal in charge of that child. Sometimes you may have to walk up to the counseling office and say, hey, has any other teacher had an issue with this kid? I do that all the time. And you will be surprised. There's some things they can and cannot tell you, but at the end of the day, you can get a little bit deeper into what's going on. But also, that being said, you are going to have those kids. Sometimes you just have to let go. And I hate to say that, for years and years and years, I'm the one that just wants to save the world. I want to save every single child. Every kid at the school needs to be in the band because we built great people. But every now and again, sometimes you just have to let that kid go because that kid will be a cancer to the rest of the program. And so it's either deal with the huge problem or deal with that one. And the kid will make a decision. Either they'll leave the program and they'll thank you for it later, or they'll straighten up and then it's all great for everybody. But it has to do with those relationships. You hear that all the time. That's the new buzzword, building relationships. But it's true. At the end of the day, it's true. Talk to your kids about something other than band. Make sure that they know that they have a life outside of band, because they all think that you think the only thing they have to do is band. because it was like that for us. For many of us, band was life. You know, band is not necessarily life for every kid in our program. You know, soccer may be number one, baseball may be number one, and that's okay. And let them know that that's okay. And sometimes that those issues that you have, if they know that you're interested in the kid and not just the one that can, you know, make you look great at a great performance, then maybe you'll have, you know, less issues, less negativity in your program. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that, all of you. So our last question for you this evening is, how are you each preserving or fostering your ensemble culture in our current situation with the online learning and everything that's going on? So let's start with Myra on this one.
It's been tough. I'm not gonna say that it's been easy. You know, it goes back to those personal relationships, like you said before. We called, you know, the Zoom class our band room, our virtual band room, you know, just using different terminology. We're required in our school system to meet with our kids on a schedule. We're one-to-one, luckily, and so we still have class, so to speak. But one thing that we've done is have meetings outside of class time. So like, you know, all the seniors met at this time, all the juniors met at this time. We had hangout time to where the kids can just come and see each other. We found out that they do communicate with their friends that they're closest with, but what they do miss is that before school and after school time where they just kind of see each other. You know, the freshmen have seniors that they look up to, you know, from a distance and kind of watch, and they don't have that anymore. So we have created these Zoom rooms, kind of like what we're doing right now with our kids to try to help with that. We're doing a virtual award ceremony. That's going to be next week. We've had virtual parent meetings with rising ninth graders and with current parents, and the current parents were, you know, chit-chatting, you know, before and after the meeting, just like they were just long lost friends. So it was great. We have incorporated more games. Our goal right now is just to keep the kids playing. We just want the horn on your face. So we created things like Name That Tune. You know, turn it in Tuesday and upload a video. And then on Friday when we meet for class, we're gonna play the game and let's see who wins. And so we screen share those videos, and the kids are like, oh, that's great. Oh yeah. You know, we had them to make some videos for recruitment for 5th to 6th grade, rising 6th grade beginners. The high schoolers did that. And we viewed those in class earlier this week. And the kids just giving feedback to each other. Oh, that was so creative. Oh, that was great. How'd you do this? How'd you do that? And they get to interact with each other like that. Do we have 100% of our kids logging on? No, I wish we did. Our last class meeting is this Thursday and Friday, and we're like trying to make a big push. Let's have our final meeting, the final meeting of the wind ensemble, the final meeting of the symphonic band, and just trying to make a big deal out of it to try to see if we can get everybody just to log on at the same time. And so hopefully it'll work, but just those are the little things, just checking in on them and sending text messages, remind texts, and different things like that, just to try to create that band room culture virtually.
Great, thank you. And Tiffany?
I have been working hard to show patience and compassion. And I mean that I've been working hard because it has not been easy. Probably like most people, the things that feed me in working with students and in doing music with students, you know, we're lacking all of that. And so, you know, I'm trying to give myself grace that I'm giving other people too. I'm trying to kind of keep that pattern going. But everybody's realities look different. And I think it's, as we've mentioned, like, we don't know what every kid is dealing with. we don't know their ability to practice. We don't know if their parents are on conference calls all day and they can't pick up their instrument, or, any number of issues. And so I'm just trying to show a lot of patience and compassion about students' participation in getting work in and things like that. We have once a week synchronous classes, and then we have asynchronous learning that can happen at any point. But for our synchronous classes, it's 45 minutes, and our county has kind of gotten off to a slow start because we've had some of my friends here. We've had some problems with with the platforms we were using. And so today was really like the first real day that I was teaching. Last week was just kind of getting everybody back together. And today was the first day that we really were just teaching. And I realized I way over planned because we wanted to have, the kids started talking and visiting, and it was like, I didn't want to stop that. Just giving them that time to connect and visit at the beginning. And we're going to make a practice of that every time that we have the video meetings. And at the end of them, we're always playing some type of game. We did Pictionary last week. We did Scattergories today. So just some type of game at the end so they can just have a little fun, like not even band related, but just like be together time. And we're using some Flipgrid videos, which I think the kids are enjoying because they can see each other a little bit, and it's low stakes and they're short and all of those things. We do have office hours as well. I was telling someone earlier yesterday I had office hours, and it started at 9, and a student came in, and about 25 minutes in, I was like, well, do you have a question? And finally he said, well, where's the rest of my class? And he had his days mixed up and he thought it was his class. And anyway, long story short, I was like, no, your class is tomorrow. It's not today. And he just hung out for the next 40 minutes because he just wanted to visit and just, talk. And it's those types of interactions that I'm really trying to have. And so I'm trying to give students those types too. And, I want them to play. I want them to continue that work. And I also figure that will come, and I'm focusing on the connectivity and just the personal relationships that students get out of our classes and get out of our discipline.
Great, thank you. And Professor Hauser.
Yeah, I don't know about you all, but if I get one more email that says stay well, stay safe, I know we have good intentions, but it is we want the very best for our students, and I get that. But it's very trying, and I think the longer that we're in this, I think that's where we start to see we get the hang of what this virtual teaching and virtual learning is supposed to look like. But at the same time, there's a lot of challenges with that of keeping people involved. Very fortunate, the classes that I've taught. Today's our last day of classes at Illinois, and then we go into final exams. So, I've been very fortunate. I know I've got some of the students on here as well, so I'm not saying it just because they're on, but they have been really just a delight. They've been very easy to work with, and I think the biggest theme with all of this is just making sure that we are there for them. And that has, I think, been a resounding statement from so many of our students of just thanks for your flexibility, thank you for your patience. You've got to continue to teach, and especially with our music education students in conducting, and we're teaching drill and marching band procedures and all these other things. You want to get the content out there, but at the same time, all of our students are dealing with very different things, with being at home. Even if everything's okay at home, it's still a different scenario than when we're in the classroom. So, the focus is different. I think all of that, just making sure that we as educators, that we're dynamic, we're flexible, we're patient. We continue to check in on them. Just how are you doing? Is this too much work for you right now? And, I think depending on the age group that we teach with, we may be more flexible with that. With our college students, that was very important, especially with our music education students, to ask them. Because I know some of their other professors are continuing on as normal, which philosophically I don't really agree with. I feel that this is different. And in conducting, we've had to make some very quick shifts of how we do this. We're no longer conducting a live ensemble, we're conducting recordings. So, things along those lines. With things on the athletic band side and even the concert side, we're doing a lot of things to feature our students, and I think that's important. So as we look at, the virtual banquets and the awards ceremonies, those are also important. We put together, I'm not a big fan of the whole virtual band thing, but we did a virtual Illinois loyalty, and we did that so our students had the opportunity to play for something. It wasn't mandatory. Those that could did. And then that virtual Illinois loyalty is actually being used for the virtual commencements, the variety of end-of-year celebrations, the president's office. It's been on the news, just to do some uplifting spirit. And, that's part of our job as well. We're in this because music hopefully has some type of, again, elevating the human spirit. And in a time like this, we need music now more than ever, I feel. And there are some unique ways to do that. So, learn from each other, steal from one another. There's so many different things that we're doing. We're focusing on those students, highlighting our seniors. I feel horrible for our seniors in high school, our 8th graders in middle school, our seniors in college. They're at their specific school. So what can we do to highlight them? So we've been highlighting a senior, each day. What's their favorite song? What's their favorite thing that they do in the Marching Illini? We're featuring our band directors in the state and the students that they have that are part of the Marching Illini. Lots of things just to highlight the positivity that music can provide. So that is something. Last thing I'll say, because I know time is here. We hold a lot of our auditions early for the next band with our marching band. So we have currently gone through our drumline auditions, we've gone through our dance team auditions, our guard auditions, and we're finalizing our woodwind and brass auditions. We hesitated to even go down this road. Everything's on a virtual platform. But the one thing that I've heard from our prospective students, because in a lot of ways we're catering to so many different populations, prospective students, our current students, our alums, the fans of our programs, the community members. But one thing that I think is so interesting is that our students have something to look forward to. And by having some of these things, if it's not too overbearing, so many of them have said, I don't know if next season's going to even happen, but thank you for making sure that we're still moving forward to continue to give us some hope along the way. So, if that's not enough of what we want, when we're teaching anyway, that is just some great motivation for us to keep going, even though none of us have an idea about what our fall seasons are going to look like or our fall semesters. People may be making decisions, but it's just too soon. There's not enough known about the science behind all of this yet, and that's going to be coming out. Lots of information about that, but just keep it positive and, be encouraged. And if you're not and you need uplifting messages, talk with your colleagues. Use your colleagues and steal from them to, again, provide some wonderful opportunities for our students and continue to make a difference.
Fantastic. So before we wrap up here, I want to start by thanking our wonderful panel. Tiffany Hitz, Myra Roden, and Barry Hauser, thank you so much for all of your insight this evening. We will be taking a bit of a hiatus for probably about 3 or 4 weeks here, but we will be back. We do have some more of these sessions planned going forward, so keep an eye out for those, and we hope you will join us in the future. So once again, thank you to our amazing panel. Tonight was really, really wonderful, and we're already receiving lots of feedback. And good luck to all of you. I hope you have a wonderful, safe, enjoy whatever weather you can, and stay positive, and thank you for being here this evening.
So is this the same site for the after party? That's funny.
No, that's not.
Hey, Tiffany. What is a Wordle?
Hi, Tracy.
Hey, how are you?
I think it's wordle.net.
Okay.
.com.
It's one of those things where you type in all the words, and depending on how many times you type it in, it's bigger. And so the words that come up the most, you get to emphasize those, and then you just kind of click through, and you can pick out different patterns, different fonts, different colors. So it's kind of fun, but it makes a nice poster. I can send you, if I can't find it's WORDLE,
Okay.
and it's wordle.net.
All right.
But tell me if you have any trouble. Maybe I can find one to send to you.
Okay, cool. Thank y'all so much for doing this. This was awesome.
It was nice to see you.
It was nice to see you too. Myra, it's nice to see you as well.
Muted, sorry. It's good to see you too.
Yeah, appreciate y'all doing this. So everybody have a great evening.
Thanks.
You too.
Thank you.
I love you.
Hey,
people.
thank you so much. That was so incredible.
That's fantastic. People are lighting up my phone while you all are talking about how like remarkably thoughtful and positive all three of you are. Like seriously.
Oh, they were great.
No, you all were wonderful.
Oh,
I just want to make sure everybody saw the kids in Barry's background about